Shri Radhe Shri Giriraj Dharan Ki Jai. So Vaishnav Ko Jai Shri Krishna. Today is the 75th day of recordings and Varta 69, the story of Goddu Swami, a Sanodiya Brahmin from Sri Vrindavan. Bhav Prakash. In the eternal Leela, he is a maidservant in Sri Nandaraji's home named Bandi, in the pastime of Sri Krishna being bound by a rope by his mother. Bandi had given one of the ropes to Sri Yashodaji. When Rohinji heard this, she cursed Bandi. "You are just a maidservant, so why did you dare to give your rope to Sri Yashodaji to tie round Sri Thakurji's waist? Now go, fall to earth." Bandi was born into a Brahmin family in Mathura. He was of a renunciate nature even from the age of 8. He came alone to Vrindavan from Mathura to live. He had brought about 10 days' worth of supplies with him from Mathura to Vrindavan. He sat on Kishori Ghat and thought to himself, "Oh, when will the Lord grace me?" A few souls, some residents of Vraja, came to him and asked him to accept them as his disciples, which he did, telling them to constantly chant the name of the Lord. Part 1. One night, Goddu Swami was suffering terrible pangs of separation from the Lord. "My whole life is passing by. I have wasted my birth in this human body." His eyes welled up with tears. He fell asleep and dreamt of Sri Thakurji telling him that the next morning Sri Acharyaji would be coming there to Kishori Ghat for his bath and that he should surrender to him. "He will bless you," he said. Goddu Swami's eyes opened and he began to look forward to the next morning when he would be able to surrender to Sri Acharyaji. Soon it was morning. Sri Acharyaji had left Sri Giriraji in the night, and so he arrived early in the morning to bathe and perform his morning prayers on Kishori Ghat. Goddu Swami asked Krishnadas who he was, and he replied that this was Sri Vallabhacharyaji, who had just come from Sri Giriraji. Goddu Swami approached him and bowed low, then requested him to bless him by making him a disciple. Sri Acharyaji said, "You are already known as Swami and you have your own followers, so why are you asking to become my disciple?" Goddu Swami replied that he had received the command of the Lord himself to become his disciple. "Please grace me by allowing me to serve you," he said. Sri Acharyaji instructed him to bathe, and when he had Sri Acharyaji initiated him with the Lord's name in Brahmasambandh, Goddu Swami then sent all his followers to be initiated with the Lord's name by Sri Acharyaji. Bhav Prakash. Goddu Swami then confided in Sri Acharyaji that his mother and father were non-believers and that they lived in Mathura. He had left them to come to Sri Vrindavan alone and had never married. He had been renounced ever since he was very young. He requested Sri Acharyaji to bless him in such a way that his mind never stray from the Leelas of Sri Thakurji. Sri Acharyaji gave him some of the water that had washed his feet and composed the Trivida Namavali treatise and told Goddu Swami to always recite it. Goddu Swami began to experience the Leelas of the Lord, and his mind was unerringly absorbed in the heartfelt service of the Beloved. Goddu Swami was thus an accomplished Vaishnava and the recipient of great grace from Sri Acharyaji. His story is really indescribable. His mental absorption into the Lord's pastimes goes unsurpassed. There is a lot more to tell. Truly his tale has no end. Thus concludes Varta 69, the story of Goddu Swami, a Sanodiya Brahmin from Sri Vrindavan, although there is no real end to his tale. Varta 70, the story of Kanhaiya Shal, Kshatriya from Agra. Bhav Prakash. In the eternal Leela, Kanhaiya Shal is a Sakhi of Sri Lalitaji named Kamodini. Here he was born to one Shal Kshatriya in Agra. At first they were very poor, but on the day that Kanhaiya was born, the mother and father found lots of money buried in the ground in their house. They considered that the son must be the bringer of great good luck, and so they named him Kanhaiya Shal and had a lot of affection for him. Even when he grew up, they did not like him to go out of the house. When he reached 13, his father died, and so he tried to persuade his mother to let him venture outside. "Mathura is a very holy place, and I have never visited any of the Lord's temples," he said. His mother said that he should never go out of her sight. He then kept quiet. He had a maternal uncle who was going to Mathura, and Kanhaiya asked her to let him go with him to bathe in Mathura. Otherwise he would run off by himself, he threatened. His mother then fearfully asked her brother to take the boy to Mathura and let him bathe there, and without letting him go around the temples or the town, to bring him straight back. "If you want to go around Vraja, please bring my son back first," she requested. Kanhaiya Shal got to Mathura and bathed at Vishram Ghat. There he asked his uncle to take him all around the Vraja area. His uncle told him that his mother had forbidden this. Kanhaiya objected, "My mother is so overprotective, but when will I get another chance? Let's go and see all the forests of Vraj." Off they went. 5 days later they came to Sri Govardhan. When he saw Sri Giriraji, Kanhaiya became crazy. He would not speak nor get up. He would smile at everyone he saw. He would only eat if someone put food into his mouth and would only wear clothes if someone dressed him. He forgot all about his body. His uncle became worried. If I take him home in this condition, his mother will cry, he thought. So he stayed there in Govardhan with the boy. He asked many renunciates, visitors, doctors, and everyone else to try and help the boy for a reward. Whenever they asked, but no one succeeded, they tried many medicines, mantras and prayers, but Kanhaiya's condition remained the same. A whole month passed in this way. The mother was distraught when she heard nothing from the boy. My brother said he would be back in 5 days, but he has been gone a whole month, she thought. There must be a reason. She summoned one man and asked him to go to Mathura to try to find out what had happened to the pair. Please come back with some news of them, she begged. Do not let them know who you are or why you are there. Bring me their news and I will give you 10 rupees. The man set off. He picked up their trail in Mathura and came back to Agra. Your son has lost his mind. Your brother has tried everything but can't help him. The mother was very annoyed. See, that is why I did not want him to go out, she said. Now what should I do? She told the same man, rent a palanquin and come with me. I will give you another 10 rupees. Please take me to my son. The man brought the rented palanquin. She paid them 1,000 rupees for the rent and sat in it. She reached Govardhan and found her son there. She embraced him and then angrily sent her brother away. You made my son go mad, she accused him. She called all sorts of clever people, but no one could help the boy. She asked all of the local residents if they knew of any holy great person who would be able to heal him. She said she would be willing to serve them. At that time, Saru Pandey had come to Govardhan from Anyor. The old lady asked him if he knew anyone, and told her that Sri Acharyaji was in his village and that he had impressed and then made many disciples amongst the local people, and that for him the Lord had appeared out of the Sri Giriraj mountain, that he was the Lord himself. He could make anything at all happen. However, she should not tell him who had told her about him. The old lady asked him to take her to his village so that she could ask for his help. Saru Pandey offered to show her the way since he was going back home. She sat her son down in the palanquin with her and they came to Anyor. She borrowed one Brajavasi's house and locked her son up inside. She came to Sri Acharyaji and bowed down before him. Sri Acharyaji told her that he knew why she had come. Bring your son here now, he said, and I will make him better. Don't make a fuss. She brought Kanhaiya to him. Sri Acharyaji took some of Thakurji's drinking water and sprinkled it over him while saying a few prayers. Immediately Kanhaiya came back to his senses. He bowed to Sri Acharyaji and said, O Maharaj, I was very happily absorbed in the contemplation of Braj, Sri Govardhan and the Lord's Leelas, so why did you take me out of that state? You have appeared to give the reward to such divine... You have appeared to give the reward of such divine vision, so why have you done this? Sri Acharyaji answered, when the loving mood swells, it should not be allowed to go beyond its reasonable limit. Therefore, I have just brought it back under control. Your love for the Lord should be firmly fixed, and you may be enjoying the experience of the Lord's love, but no one in the world should know about this. Then the love can never be damaged. Kanhaiya requested Sri Acharyaji, please let me have your grace to receive this permanent love. Sri Acharyaji had Kanhaiya bathe and sat him down in front of Srinathji and initiated him with the Lord's name and Brahma Sambandha. He let Kanhaiya have the direct vision of the Lord's pastimes. He initiated Kanhaiya's mother with the name only. Sri Acharyaji then taught to Kanhaiya all the small treatises he had composed. He then told the boy to go home and experience the Lord there. From now on, the ways of the world and the rules of the scriptures will not present any obstacle in your way. Kanhaiya's mother offered 1,000 rupees to Sri Acharyaji and thanked him for helping her son and her. You are the Lord himself. No one else could help my boy. Sri Acharyaji then told her to take her son home with her. Kanhaiya Shal's mother requested Sri Acharyaji to come to Agra to visit her home, saying it would be a great blessing upon her if he would come and purify the place. Sri Acharyaji said he would come there on the way to Adel. Now go home, he said. Kanhaiya and his mother bowed to Sri Acharyaji, took his leave and came to Agra. Kanhaiya Shal was always absorbed in the Lord's pastimes, and the old lady did all the housework. After some time, when Sri Acharyaji was travelling through Agra, he stayed at their house. He established the understanding of the innermost meaning of all his treatises and all of Sri Thakurji's pastimes, along with the principles of the path of grace, in Kanhaiya Shal's heart. He stayed for 5 nights. The old lady donated large sums of money to him, and then he left for Adel. Part 1. Sri Gosaiji asked his grandmother, Sri Akaji, I learnt the ways of this path from Damodar Das, but where can I find my father's written treatises? Sri Akaji told him, if you want to find those, you must go to Agra to Kanhaiya Shal's Kshatriya. He went there. Kanhaiya Shal received him with great affection. Sri Gosaiji sat with Kanhaiya Shal and read all of Sri Acharyaji's works. Then he composed a commentary to each of them and graced Kanhaiya Lal by reading them to him. After that, Sri Gosaiji read to Kanhaiya Shal all the treatises he himself had written, Dan Leela, Hulas, Bhattacharya, etc., books on very esoteric subjects. Kanhaiya Shal wanted to bow down to Sri Gosaiji, but he would not allow that, saying to him, my father Sri Acharyaji lives in your heart. In this way, with the great grace of Sri Acharyaji and Sri Gosaiji, Kanhaiya Shal experienced the beloved Lord in the moods of both separation and union, and he was always absorbed in such experiences. After this, Sri Gosaiji went to Adel. Not long after Kanhaiya Shal's mother left her body, he remarked, now all the obstacles are gone from my path. She was always interrupting me for my meals. From then on, if he remembered to, he would eat, and if not, he would just sit there. Part 2. Once Sri Gosaiji came to Agra from Adel and he stayed at Kanhaiya Shal's house. He told Kanhaiya Shal that he intended to travel to Sri Dwarakapuri. Kanhaiya Shal said that he would also go there and have Sri Gosaiji's sight there once he had reached, but Sri Gosaiji interjected, how will you come? You don't speak to anyone except Vaishnavas, and it is a long way. Kanhaiya Shal said that he would not need to speak to anyone else, and he would travel behind Sri Gosaiji. Sri Gosaiji said to him, you have the strength of grace. Do whatever you feel is best for you. Sri Gosaiji stayed with him for 2 days, and that only to discuss Sri Acharyaji's treatises. He then left for Dwarka. One day, Kanhaiya Shal decided to also leave for Dwarka and catch up with Sri Gosaiji to have his sight. He set off but was not sure of the way. He would not speak to anyone to ask. He wandered like this for 3 days and found himself in a thick forest with no water. He thought that he would surely die. So he sat under a small tree and began to read Sri Acharyaji's compositions. Suddenly, a cowherd boy approached him and said, what are you doing sitting here? There are snakes and lions around this area. Kanhaiya Shal replied, I am a disciple of Sri Acharyaji, so snakes and lions cannot come near me. The cowherd boy told him that there was a lake just behind where he could drink water. Kanhaiya Shal looked behind him and saw a lake full of water. He began to drink from it. Then a second cowherd boy brought Mahaprasad from Srinathji, both Sakri and Anasakri, and proffered it to Kanhaiya Shal. He asked where the Mahaprasad had come from. I only eat at home or from Sri Gosaiji, not from anywhere else. The cowherd told him that this was Srinathji's Mahaprasad. Take it, he said, or do you want to die and thus lay the blame on the Lord? Are you going to be that stubborn? Kanhaiya Shal then saw the Mahaprasad, and knowing it to be from Srinathji, bowed to it and ate it. After this, a third cowherd boy came there and asked what he was doing, just sitting there when he should be going to have the sight of Sri Ranchorlalji. Kanhaiya Shal turned round and saw that Sri Ranchorlalji's temple was visible from there. Kanhaiya Shal that said he would go there if Sri Gosaiji were there. The cowherd boy said that it was Sri Gosaiji who had sent him to tell him to come to him quickly. Kanhaiya Shal went to Sri Ranchorlalji's temple and met Sri Gosaiji. You have come, he said. Did you speak to anyone on the way? Kanhaiya Shal said that he had no reason to speak to anyone. Sri Gosaiji asked him, but you spoke to the 3 cowherd boys, so why did you say you have spoken to no one? Kanhaiya Shal replied that his voice would not even sound if he had to speak to anyone else, other than yourself, who would come in the form of 3 cowherds to the forest and offer me Sakri and Anasakri Prasad, and would I take from anyone else's hand? This is all your grace. Hearing this, Sri Gosaiji held Kanhaiya Shal's hand and took him for the sight of Sri Ranachod Lalji. Looking at Ranachod Lalji, Kanhaiya Shal found that he was looking at Sri Govardhan Naji. Sri Gosaiji asked him whether he had enjoyed the sight of Sri Ranachod Lalji, and he replied that through his grace his eyes were always on Govardhan, on Sri Govardhan Dara's form, and he had the sight of Sri Govardhan Dara only, Bhav Prakash. Here we clearly understand that Kanhaiya Shal was exclusively absorbed in the beloved Lord's Vraja pastimes. Part 2 continued. Sri Gosaiji brought Kanhaiya Shal to his tent and told him to travel with him back to Agra. Kanhaiya Shal answered, "O Maharaj, you have appeared on the earth to uplift the fallen souls. Therefore you might take a long time on the journey. I also love to be alone, therefore bless me that I return to Agra by myself." Sri Gosaiji said, "You have the strength of Sri Acharyaji's grace. Whatever you want to do will be the best for you." Kanhaiya Lal took his leave and set off. He spent 2 days completely absorbed in the Lord's contemplation, and then he found himself in a thick forest, could not find the way. So he sat down under a tree and began to read Sri Acharyaji's treatises with Sri Gosaiji's commentaries, and also Sri Gosaiji's esoteric compositions. A cowherd boy appeared and said, "Why are you sitting here? If you want to bathe in or drink from Sri Yamunaji, then please do so and return home." Kanhaiya Shal lifted his eyes from the books and saw Sri Yamunaji in the town of Agra. He bathed in Sri Yamunaji and sipped some of her waters, said his prayers and went home. After some days, Sri Gosaiji arrived from Dwarka. Sri Gosaiji asked Kanhaiya Shal how many days it had taken him to get back and how his journey had been. Kanhaiya Shal answered thus, "I really don't know. You took me there and brought me back. That is all I know." Sri Gosaiji was delighted to hear his response and stayed with Shal for 3 days. They discussed the Lord's pastimes and became full of bliss. Sri Gosaiji then went on to Adel. Kanhaiya Shal only delved into worldly or scriptural duties when he could remember his body. Otherwise, he was constantly absorbed in his contemplation. He was soaked in the joy of the Lord's loving pastimes. His story is so contrary to the usual ways of the world that it is very difficult to describe. Bhav Prakash. How and why tell anybody about the moods of Sri Thakurji's loving pastimes when they know nothing about them and would not believe them anyway? That is why they are left unexposed. The ways of love are quite contrary. Suradasji has written the following lines in Rag Saranga. No one can fathom the pastimes of Vraj. Even Brahma, Shesh, Mahesh and Narayan cannot grasp their meaning. The Vedas and the other scriptures have told of varied ways to encounter the Lord, but Singh Suradas, the Gopi's own path, is completely different. Thus Kanhaiya Shal was a recipient and great accomplished Vaishnav, the recipient of great grace. Thus concludes Varta 70, the story of Kanhaiya Shal. However, there is really no end to his story. Shri Vallabhadhish ki jai. Aaj ke Anand ki jai. Jai Jai Shri Radhe. Radhe Radhe.